Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah with the Midwest Writing Center. If you are new to this web series, here's what you can expect. Once a week, I interview someone doing something awesome in the arts, and once a week, we give a small lesson in something literary. Today, I am very happy to introduce to you someone doing something awesome in the arts. CN Kuster is a former Fulbright scholar who attained her MFA in creative writing from Regis University and holds an MA in secondary education. She teaches high school language arts, is an avid collector of fountain pens, and loves spending time outdoors. Her debut novel, The Bloodweaver, will be published in summer 2026 through Podium Entertainment. She's an active member of the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers and Lighthouse Writers Workshop, in addition to being a founding member of the Tejon Writers Collective. She lives in the Denver area with her husband, daughter, and a very precocious, cat. Thanks
He's
for
also
hanging out with me
precious.
today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I'm particularly excited to talk about the Bloodweaver, but also all the things that come with that. Because I don't get the opportunity often to talk with I mostly talk to literary fiction writers or poets. Um, and I think that it's really, really important to remember like the constraints or conceits of genre don't need to be like scary or awkward to get excited about. And well, here you are.
Here I am.
So first, would you mind giving a little synopsis of the Bloodweaver?
Yeah, so I guess my short elevator pitch is that the Bloodweaver is the story of two siblings who get caught on opposite sides of a brewing war about whether or not this new magic should be allowed to exist within their world. It's a second world fantasy. Um, so what that means is it doesn't take place on planet Earth. But I realized a while ago that a lot of the fantasy that I read, the magic was kind of built in and ingrained into the world. And I thought to myself, what if you had a world that was kind of pre-industrial revolution, but instead of an industrial revolution, all of a sudden they get magic? And what would happen in that kind of space when all of a sudden you discover these, this magic that can all of a sudden do all these things that you were never able to do before. And then what if that magic was easily spreadable? So it, kind of burst through the constraints of the society and started to run rampant and what would happen. And so that's kind of what it's about is a brother and a sister kind of grappling with differing opinions over what should happen in this world as magic continues to spread. Um, and yeah, so it was really fun to write. Sibling rivalry. Yeah.
That's a really cool. I never really I mean, dear audience, I've interacted with CN a couple of times and know a little bit about the book, but I never put together that it was sort of instead of becoming industrial, we have a different way of accessing power. And I think that's a really, really cool idea. I guess, is that how the idea happened to you? You were like, what if,
Yeah, what if not technology? What if magic as kind of a technology? So what the magic allows people to do is anything that they can touch, they can alter with this like substance that their body produces. So it's in the context of the world, it's called weft. I really went heavy with the weaving puns, and there's actually a reason for that. But the yeah, so they can kind of exert their will over the world. So if they want to like change the color of their hair, they can do that. If they want to make certain plants produce more fruit, they can do that. They can kind of imagine what the world would be if it was ideal to their desires, and it has brought along a lot of really positive things, advances in treating medicine and illness. But then, all throughout the book, there's these anecdotes of how, oh, well, they were trying to prevent this illness and they ended up making it worse instead. Or like they were trying to do this and then this is what happened. And so, for every good thing, there is perhaps an opportunity to, question, oh, should we be doing this, with this magic um, and yeah, and it kind of came about with thinking about things like technology and the atom bomb. Like I read Oppenheimer, and that kind of gave me, as he's going back and forth about, okay, well, we can do this, right? But we're not exactly sure what's going to happen when we do, only that if we don't do it, somebody else might do it first. And that was a real drive for me about like, what if, what if magic had those same kind of questions, other rather than just, oh, let's get the powers, let's get the sword. I love those kind of novels, but I was like, let's try something different. So
That's that's really cool. Thinking about I feel like we never, maybe it's just me, think about the consequences of sort of magical um actions. You think about it when you think about like time travel, you think about it when you're like, what will happen if I don't know, patent this drug. I don't know things about patents, but um
right, yeah.
but yeah, no, I haven't seen it in terms of magic personally anyway. Um
Yeah. Right. I
so
thought I it was fun. It was fun to ask some of those questions and play with it and then create a world around that central question. Why magic? Um, and to what extent, can and should it be utilized? Um, yeah.
Well, I was gonna say what draws you to fantasy, but you said the question of why magic. Do you have an answer to why magic?
So I was a very imaginative kid. I've always loved the idea of magic, and I think a lot of times we forget that it's only fairly recently in human history that we have understood that magic does not exist, right? That there is like an order to our universe. And I mean, it really used to be that you didn't go into the woods because there were things that existed in the woods that were beyond your comprehension. It wasn't just dangerous. It was a an act of great faith and in some cases recklessness to go outside and to explore the unknown. And so I always liked, one, the escapism that magic offers. It does do that, and I think we need to recognize that that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, escaping can be good, and by escaping we can get out of our worldview and of our comfort zone. And so I think that's one reason, why magic. Well, because it has been part of our human history for such a long time, and two, it allows us to ask questions and see things from a different perspective that may not we may not be able to see unless we use magic as a device to allow us to have that conversation. So, and it's fun. Like, it's just so much fun. There, it's a lot of time. There's a lot of things that magic allows us to rediscover a sense of whimsy and joy, which I think is very important. Again, to keep in our hearts the fact that even though we have answers for so many things in the world, there's a lot of stuff we still don't have answers for. And why not magic? And so even kind of pushing back on that, on my own claim that, like, oh, now we're a world without magic. Well, yes, we have science, we have the scientific process, we have all that kind of stuff. And still with that, there's so many questions and so many things that border on the magical, if you will. And it's, because we are still figuring out our greater place. So, why not magic would be my my question to people that are like, oh, why do you use magic? Why not? Why not?
I'm really grateful for that answer. I feel like, well, two things, right? You touched on this. Like we use the word magic until we use the word science. It's not
Exactly. Yes.
it's not like any of us has some some understanding of everything.
Right.
But then also, I feel like most people I know who love reading started reading as escapism, and I think that's cool. Like, even if you weren't, being tortured or whatever in your childhood,
Right.
strong
Yeah.
language on my part, there was something to escape to if it wasn't escaping from. And I don't know, that's what I read as a kid was fantasy, and I didn't really read it much until recently, but um there's something really, really special about just reading in general about l- l- slipping into someone else's life. Um, Maybe not in their skin, but in their world. And why not take that as far as you can? We have these imaginations we've been gifted with.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Why not push it as far as it can go? And I think magic you can still write with a literary style, with a great attention to, sentence structure and the poetics of language, careful word choice, rhythm. You can still be literary within that spectrum. So I would, I would honestly, and I think I've been doing this my entire life, push back on the idea that there has to be a rigid line between the literary and the genre. Um,
Oh, that's a
I
pet peeve of mine. A
Good
good book is a good book. A good
book
story
is a
is a
good
good
book,
story. Good
right?
writing is good writing. I mean, as I understand it, most of the time, these genre delineations exist for marketing and for show.
Right.
And that doesn't mean, I don't know, someone who isn't on X shelf is bad at what they're doing or is significantly different. I mean, I don't know if I buy into the, eight total plots exist in all of fiction idea. I don't
Yeah.
think about
No,
it
I
that
don't.
often, but that means that those same plots are across each genre. So
Right,
really
right.
different.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I think, and I think yeah, we need to remember that, especially when we're in the process of being creative. The whole point of being creative, I think, is to make meaning, to find joy, um, to create something where there was previously nothing, which is as close to the meaning of life that I can, figure out. So I think when we're in that process of playing, right, in the creative space, we shouldn't worry about exactly where it fits or how it's going to ring or who's going to come around and put what label on the thing to make it saleable. I think, as writers, we just need to find like what makes our hearts sing with
Mm.
joy and embrace it, and if that's magic, that's awesome. And if that's like reality, that's awesome. But I would argue that I have a toddler and I've learned a few things from her that there really is kind of magic everywhere if you allow yourself to see it. I have never, she's really big into like roly-polies right now. A bug that I had not thought about, an, you know, an isopod, if you will, that I've not thought about for decades as really anything other than, oh, look, there's one on the sidewalk. And all of a sudden, there are these fascinating things with these complex structures that have this purpose within my yard, not just to entertain my toddler, but they are doing, fascinating things. And so I think if you open yourself up to the whimsy of reality, you can inject magic even if your characters aren't throwing fireballs or conjuring lightning or, doing whatever. So I would push that idea of magic is possible even in a starkly real setting.
This is one of my favorite things. I will absolutely get way, way, way off topic, but I I think there are so few people who properly understand any of the sciences that we take for granted. Like I understand that if I jump, I will return to the ground, you know?
Right.
And you can tell me the equations and the logic that make gravity a thing, but I will not understand it. I'll understand probably what you're saying, but not how it actually works and why, like, I will never feel compelled to I mean I think science is the coolest thing in the world, like the attempt to understand how and why things around us do what they do. But that doesn't mean that I don't have to have or that I can't have awe, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's that sense of awe or, the coming together of two characters or having a moment of, what feels like serenity amid the chaos. Those things can be awe-provoking or, I love it when there's, vivid imagery to me can conjure just as much as anything else, is in terms of creating moments that feel like magic, if you will. Even in, I think about some of like the great literary writers. I'm teaching right now Nathaniel Hawthorne, and the way he describes the rose bush at the beginning of the Scarlet Letter as, plucking he describes it as I think it's like a glittering gem of a rose and reminding, juxtaposing the color of the rose with the very austere setting of a Puritan colony, in the start of what we, now call America. Um, that's a moment of magic. It is in the real world. But he, uses it so poignantly that it becomes, I think, for the reader a magical object, even though it is just a rose bush. And then of course it becomes a symbol for, Hester herself. So
I have
sorry, I
so
didn't mean to
many
get into the Scarlet Letter
I
there,
have
but
so many thoughts on Hawthorne. I feel for
I
you
love the
teaching it
romantics,
to
man.
teenagers. I think that must be so hard.
Say that again.
It must be so hard to teach Hawthorne to teenagers.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, oh, it can be. But but the ones who get it really get it and appreciate it and they haven't read anything like it before.
Or
Um
sense, shoot.
but yeah, I have a soft spot for the romantics. I really do. Nobody describes things like they did.
Forever.
Forever. Yeah, forever and ever and ever. To maybe sometimes to a fault, but yeah, I miss some of the, they conjured the ephemeral. I mean, and that's what, transcendent was, to be
Yeah.
transcendent was to find the sublime in the mundane. So,
Damn. I'm glad you're an English teacher. That was beautiful.
yeah. Well, you all were warned when you heard my bio.
So I assume that you're a fantasy fan, and that's
Yeah.
why your writing is in the fantasy world. Um, but I also assume that if you cut fantasy elements, if you cut the magic out of your story, the story would remain.
Yes, I mean the magic itself is a large part of it because it's, the creation of the central conflict. But I do think, like, could I replace that with some other big question that was rooted, in our own experience in this world? Absolutely. I could still have a brother and a sister, have some kind of deep existential crisis with each other that they respond to in different ways. And that would be yeah. So like if you wanted to, I think, pull the magic out, it absolutely could happen. Right? Um there's nothing in there that uh is so dependent on the magic that it could not exist without it.
I definitely lost my train of thought. I definitely see, the magic itself is the catalyst for this story, but really what the magic is doing for the story is giving us a little more. I had the word when I first started trying to make this sentence. Giving us a little more something to hold on to when we enter the story. It's giving us the I don't know, the fun.
An anchor, anchor
Thank
point.
you. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really cool. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
was it hard then to, because look, I've talked to people about world building. I've talked to people about, because this is, well, something I think would be interesting to make educational videos on, but also because it's just not something I understand. So I've talked about, world building and how to approach the constraints and all that. But I just cannot fathom being able to create a magic system. It was that really
It's,
how
I
do
think
you
it's
do that?
hard. Yeah. I think it's really hard. And I applaud people who do it and have very complex, you know, magic systems. And for me, it was kind of a trial and error process as I went about it, was trying to define exactly what it was that I wanted the magic to do and how it operated and like where it could succeed and where it could fail, and then asking questions about like what is the toll that it takes on the user. Is it something that exacts a toll? Some magic systems, uh and I tend to gravitate toward magic systems that fail in interesting ways as opposed to succeed in interesting ways. Like, um one book that is on my mind, I was reading about a special release of it today, was the Scholomance series by Naiomi Novik. So she did the first one's a Deadly Education. Um, and so the Deadly Education has a really interesting magic system where, um, wizards are born into our world and people able to like control this, or, to wield magic. But wielding this magic attracts monsters and, very predatory beings to the user. And especially when they are developing their magic, it's kind of like, predators seeking the young and the weak. So because they can't defend themselves, these students become prime targets for these monsters. So the society has created this school that houses them. And it is a very dangerous place, but it is safer than just being a wizard out in the real world and getting eaten, like that by a monster. Um, and so part of their education is kind of learning to fight these monsters. And then there are hints that this school that's been created, this safe haven, some people have maybe learned to abuse that system for their own gain, a little bit. And so to use magic, you have to generate it. So Naiomi Novik conceived of basically two forms of generating the power to fuel the magic. One, you generate it yourself by like working out, which I will be honest, if working out generated magical power, I would be a lot more in shape than I currently am. Just gonna throw that out there. The other thing you can do is take it from somebody else. So, and that's kind of bad. It disfigures the user. It shows, it corrupts them internally. So the main character has to constantly be working to generate this magic system, this magic. And if you don't store it, you'll lose it. And if you use too much, you might find yourself in a situation where you wish you could have more. And so that's interesting because then the magic is so clearly defined. And of course, the main character gets herself into a situation where she doesn't have the magic that she needs to have. Um, and so it's not just something like, oh, I'll just throw some magic at it and make it go away. It really becomes this system of like give and take. Um, and then yeah, how are people abusing this magic or like abusing this system that's been put into place? And through having a way that the magic can be abused, Naiomi Novik is able to use magic kind of as an allegory to discuss systemic abuses of power, right? Which is really cool. And so that's something that like I think fantasy can do, is when you're reading Scholomance, you get this escapist quality and this fun quality of like, oh, we're fighting monsters and we're using power and there's magic and I'm enjoying this, but I'm also thinking critically about, oh, systemic abuse of power. you know, where do I see that anyplace else? You know, and that's clever. I love it when fantasy can do that, you know, and then you can have those bigger conversations, and it's kind of a an invitation to think critically. I see a lot of fantasy writers doing that nowadays. N.K. Jemisin does it. Uh um let's see, Nghi with her, especially, what is it, it's the Singing Hills cycle, the way she talks about the power of stories and uses it to discuss the kinds of stories we tell versus those who suppress. Fantastic writing. um yeah, so I see fantasy doing a lot of really cool things in that space too.
Um, so you said one, that's really cool. And I know that sci-fi is used that way too to function as allegory like a lot.
A lot, yeah.
But you said something that I found really, really compelling and I really want to talk about because it's something that bothers me a lot when I'm engaging with, I guess, worlds that include magic. Um, you said it's not just something that you can throw the magic at and solve, and I feel like that's something I expect to come up a lot. And so there
Yeah.
is a really big spider over there. Uh, it's far away, but I'm like
Ooh.
questions about it. Um, and I feel like I've at least engaged with enough mm, magic using worlds where I'm like, okay, but can't you just throw some magic at it and solve that problem? And it sounds like ideally, no,
No.
like that's bad
Yeah.
writing.
Right,
Because if
right.
so,
So if
we just would.
right. And granted, like, yes, it's fun to have minor problems that are solved with magic, right? That's great. But when we get to the big showdown, um, we ideally want to see the places where the magic doesn't work and the character has to, like, they have to do the thing, right? So in my, in the Bloodweaver, the big conflict is these two siblings who have a strained relationship, and the magic is the reason the relationship is strained. So they cannot throw magic at it to get it better. Like, the magic isn't going to solve that problem. They have to do the work to solve the problem, or not, right? And that's the big question. Will they be able to overcome, their differences? And um, if, if you have a world that is um struggling with the magic, and Netflix's Arcane, I think, did this really well. Throwing more magic at it is not going to solve the problem of what do we do with all this magic, that we have running around. And in Arcane, it's being abused. Some people are turning it into like street drugs, and um others, while others are withholding it, or trying to solve problems that maybe don't need to be solved. One guy is trying to like transcend what it means to be human, um and is that a problem that we need to solve? No, so yeah, so I love it when magic either can't be the only thing that solves the problem, or then maybe even becomes the problem. um and I think that's really compelling and fun. Or even, when, if a character is very overpowered, they're doing it at the expense of themselves. R.F. Kuang's The Poppy Wars kind of deals with that, and it gets to a point where um the answer is not throwing more power at the thing. It's nuance and diplomacy, um and hard discussions, which, if that's what you're going to do, you can't, somebody, who's just used to coming and blowing everything up isn't going to function really well in that space. So, and that's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. I have more questions on the topic of magic systems. Mm, mm, mm. So my questions are like not written in full sentences, which is why I stumble through them.
No,
Uh,
that's okay.
how do you make the audience understand your magic system?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I think it's a good one because I definitely messed this up in early drafts. Um, I think there's a tendency when you've come up with this cool magic system, like you, the writer, want to be like, look at the system that I made. Like, look what it does. Look at all the things. And let me just tell you about it. Let me tell you about it. Um, it's
I've
showing
had that
that,
conversation.
yes, it's showing that magic in action and then letting the reader figure it out. Um, and or showing what the reaction to that magic is. So, in my opening scenes, there are people who are searching for these magic users to, arrest and kind of quell the spread of this magic. And so, the first thing that you really see is the great lengths that people are willing to go to keep it from spreading, and the inhumane lengths that people are willing to go. And so, before I even show the magic in action, I've shown the reaction to it. And I introduced, the fact that this is serious. People are terrified. There's misinformation out there. I let the readers kind of hear the crowd murmuring about things that they've heard, while my character, who is a magic user, is kind of internally grappling with, they're talking about me. They don't think they're talking about me because they don't know that I can do this, but they're talking about me. And then when he finally is in a place where he can use the magic, that's when you get kind of the full view of what it is that the magic can do. And so it literally, like, my first impulse as a writer, I have an early chapter that got cut where he's sitting and just kind of playing with the magic, and he's using it to heal a mouse that had gotten caught in a trap in the family's wine cellar. Uh, and and it was fun for me to write, but it didn't start the story with that action. So by seeing the reaction to the magic, it starts the stakes a lot higher, I think. And yeah, and creating the question in the reader's mind of, well, what actually does this magic do if this is what people are willing to do to each other to keep it from spreading? um and then once I think that question is in the reader's mind, what does this magic do, then maybe they'll be willing to forgive me a little bit when I geek out about it further along, um in the so yeah, so approaching it with strategy, and knowing, like, you don't need to give us everything at once. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn, as a writer, that, like, I hope that there are many more fantasy books in my future, but um having drafted this one, um and going through many, many, many opening chapter revisions to get it just right, I think that was my one big takeaway, is that sometimes with the magic system, less is actually more.
That's really surprising and very good information. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope that's helpful. And now I see it a lot of places, and, like, when I'm, doing critique partnering thing, I'm like, oh, I that's what they're doing, and you did that too, so so it's not coming from a, like, hoity-toity place of, oh, I know how to do this perfectly. No, I didn't. Like, and it took time to get there. So, um, and I'm just hoping now that it's, I hope I have done it. Maybe in 10 years, ask me again, and I'll go back and I'll be like, oh yeah, remember that first trilogy I wrote? Here's everything I would change. So I think that's the point. You're never, hopefully, as a writer, you are continuing to grow, and you're, always reevaluating, how can I do this better? How can I, be more concise or be more engaging? And I hope I never lose that. I hope I never get stuck and think that I know everything I need to know about writing.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's healthy, right? In
Right.
I don't know. I mostly do, I don't know, some funky version of nonfiction. And the people in the, I don't know, nonfiction and poetry circles are very much like, but if I wrote it today, it would be a different piece because I don't write
Right.
like that. I don't talk like that. I don't have those thoughts anymore. And I like to think that in fiction, at least, like the story should remain. But of course, different stylistic things or like plot things that you don't have a handle on quite, or like you're stumbling through could change. But like hopefully the point of the piece remains.
Right. Yes. Hopefully the point remains.
Um, so you touched on this a little bit, but I would like to give it a little more attention. As the writer, what questions did you have to ask yourself to create your magic system?
Ooh, so a lot, really. So I mean, the first one that I asked myself is like, I tried to demagic it for in my own mind. So like, is, how does this operate, right? What is the mechanism that's occurring that allows this magic to exist in the world? Um, so I, and one of the big ones there was, how did it get here, right? Who gave this magic? Because it's new magic. So how does it get here? And in this, it is a kind of, it's in the world, it is kind of seeped into the realm of myth and fable that these, mysterious beings of light appeared and bestowed the magic. Okay, so now the characters have the magic. Um, what changes in them now that they have the magic? Because before they didn't have it, so what is physically different? And some of that is explained in the book, so I'm going to skirt around the reality of that. But yeah, what changes because in them that allows them now to perform this magic? Um, okay, so you and then all right, so you want to perform this magic. What is doable and what is not doable, and where does that distinction lie? And for me, it was, well, we are human beings, right? And the ability to do or not do a thing oftentimes depends on, do we have the resources available to do said thing within ourselves? So, um, if the person sitting next to me who's been athletic their entire life wants to go run a 5K, because they've practiced that skill, they could go run a 5K. I cannot run a 5K. Like I could maybe run a K, and then pant my way through the remaining four, while walking, right? So I was like, well, let's root it in something like that, right? Where it's based in the body, so you need practice, you need energy, you need to be able to conserve and meter out that energy, but then there will always be some things that are just beyond the realm of possibility. So that became another cool question is, well, once they discover the limit, they're going to want to push past the limit, right? So how could you push past said limit? So just kind of, it started with this, the basic question. Okay, I have this magic. I want this magic to be, I can manipulate the world around me with magic and kind of exert my will and force around the world. That's okay, cool. How? And then when I'd find an answer to that question, then I'd, okay, how, and kind of balloon outwards. And before I knew it, I had a ton of questions. And then I started, when I felt like I had a good enough grasp on it, I would start writing. I started writing. But then occasionally I'd run up against something in the plot, where I'd be like, oh, either there has to be a reason why the magic can't fix this here, and then I need to maybe go back and tighten up some of those, like some of my own questions about why the magic would work in this way or not, um, or a reason why the magic can do this thing, right? So kind of coming up with my own system of limitations. But yeah, there's there was one point where the main character is like, exercising and working out, and he's like, oh, why can't I just use the magic to make myself stronger? um and the thought in my mind was like, oh, well, you probably could, but it's the habit that leads to actual like sustaining strength, right? So, um, like, okay, I want to, make myself stronger, but I'm not willing to work. Okay, so 3 weeks from now, you're going to be deconditioned again, right? Like, that's just how reality works. So I kind of tried to, find ways to pull reality um, into magic use a little bit, and what, it can't be limitless. There has to be a limit. And so actually that was fun. I had more fun coming up with some of the constraints for it than I did with some of the abilities.
That's Awesome. It's a puzzle. It's a
It's a
puzzle
puzzle. Yeah, it is. It's like putting a puzzle together in the dark, and there's
in
no
the dark.
instructions. You're not sure what it's supposed to look like. But eventually you'll get to a point where you're like, I think I have something and it's puzzle shaped now. And then when you start to shed some light on it, you can see where maybe you need to do a little bit of tweaks and move on. So yeah, as much as I would love to be like, I had the magic concretely laid out the moment I started writing, it really wasn't until I got further along that I was able to go back and shore up some of those details in a meaningful way. So I would say I had probably 75% of it planned out ahead of time, and then that last 25% was like meaningful tweaks that I did as I was writing to make sure it felt coherent and whole, you know?
It's just so nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a weird fantasy question. It seems to me that like the first chapter or so of most fantasy books are like scene setting. Is that a genre convention or just like really common?
I think to some degree, I think it is a genre convention. Um, and I think a little bit of it's to be expected because, especially if you're doing second world fantasy, you need to give the reader a sense of place. Because if they don't have a sense of place, it can feel really jarring if you just have like all these names or like, um, yeah, you know that you're in a second world and you really you maybe need a little bit more of a to sit for the writer to sit down and let you know like what this world is and make you start to feel familiar. um i I definitely feel like I that was something that I cut out a little bit more as I got into later drafts um was trying to cut back on that, just I'm setting the scene for you. um and really tried to anchor it more in the character's own experience of the world. So um rather than tell you about all these different things, just give you the setting and the place as they move through it. And I think more I've seen more fantasy going that route. I was reading what is it? A Song of Legends Lost by M.H. And I'm not certain on the pronunciation of the last name. I believe it's Ayinde or Ayinde. Ayinde, I believe is the spelling. I'll double check on that. But I loved A Song of Legends Lost because she does that so well, I think, that the world expands as the characters move through it. There's not this like kind of overarching here's our land. She always begins with a character, and rooting our experience of the world in the character's experience of it tells us, I think, more than just blanket descriptions of setting. So I really loved that, and I just loved it's called A Song of Legends Lost, and I absolutely adored that book. I can't wait to read more of it. The magic is ancestors, so calling on the ancestors to come and kind of fight in your stead, and the power of this, centuries, being conjured. It was really cool. And then there's kind of this mysterious technology that everyone's terrified about. And it's a really good book. Song of Legends Lost, I think, does it really well.
That was such a like did not expect such a good answer.
Thank
Or
you.
like didn't expect it to be
I'm worried I'm talking too much. I get really into it.
no. I didn't expect there to be like a I didn't expect there to be a good answer. It wasn't. I'm glad I asked. Okay, so when you and I know because you've spoken on this elsewhere. When we think about magic systems, that also works with technology systems, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have to be fantasy. The same rules can apply whatever you're writing outside of this exact reality.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that, yeah, and I can't stress that enough. Magic broadly is an archetype, right? So it doesn't have to be magic power. It can be anything that is sufficiently other than maybe our own real world experience. And to some degree, like our own real world experience with smartphones, with some of, the technologies that we have in our world, it's butting up against feeling very, very magical. Um, there are a ton of stories in the past, mysteries that it's like, oh, well, if Sherlock Holmes had a cell phone, you know, um, would we, would some of these stories be able to exist as stories, if they had the technology that we have today? And so yeah, so magic, I use that term loosely, and of course, like with mine, yes, I'm talking fantasy, but in sci-fi, the magic can be the light speed starship, or the one that has cracked, travel through a wormhole, or by altering the gravitational field between great distances to shrink it down to small size so the ship can pass through, faster than light speed travel. There's that can be, that fills the archetype of the magic system. It's just rooted in scientific knowledge of our own world, and of the principles of our own universe. um One I just read, it's by Tim Weed. It's called The Afterlife Project, is a cli-fi novel about a team of scientists who,
I'm sorry, a what fi?
cli-fi, so
Okay.
climate fiction sci-fi. Uh yeah, so climate change based. So basically they recognize, the world is dying, and he's got this really cool, so basically the temperature of the planet begins to warm. A like microbe is able to, because the air is warmer, it's able to exist in the atmosphere, and it basically makes reproduction impossible. Once you get this infection, you are unfortunately, sterile or barren, and so humanity begins to die out. And they do this thing to try to jumpstart humanity again by sending a man 10,000 years into the future. And so it's kind of a dual timeline. And uh, that, right, is the magic. The magic in that sense is a microbe that, disrupts our ability as a species to reproduce, and the technology to send a human into the future. And then I don't want to say two more, because that's kind of, you understand that about 3 or 4 chapters in. But that's the big question, is can we preserve our species? Um, and so yeah, that is the magic, right? That's filling the archetypal role of the magical problem. The Even though it's rooted in, scientific possibility of, um it's a bacteria. They talk about quantum physics and creating isolated areas of, quantum squishiness. That's not the word that the novel uses. That's my own word. Yeah, but where travel rapidly through time becomes possible. Magic.
Here's a dog.
Oh,
Um,
yay.
can
I love
you hear me
dogs.
okay?
Yes.
Okay. Um, so you said squishiness, and it reminded me of the TV show Lucifer.
Oh, yeah.
In one of the later seasons, there's an episode where we see something through Lucifer's perspective. And the forensic scientist or whatever, it's a procedural show.
Yeah.
More comedy than drama, but it's procedural. And her dialogue in that part of the episode is science gack, science gack, science gack, science gack, science gack. And
Right.
since then it's been my favorite thing. Anytime I'm like, I'm sorry, what was the logic in, whatever it is that I'm watching? Science gack.
Yes. Yeah. AKA also quantum squishiness.
Quantum squishiness. There's always an explanation. It's the quantum squishiness.
Chris, it's just quantum squishiness. Yeah. That's
Real quick before I let you go, can you tell me about your Fulbright experience?
Oh, yeah. So, it was really funny because after grad school, or excuse me, after undergrad, I really had thought in my head that I wanted to go into agenting or like the editorial side of um the writing world, more into like the publication business side. And so I did live in New York for a little bit, and I pretty quickly realized that that was not actually what I wanted to do with my life. And I grew up in Iowa, and so I came back and I wasn't just was not sure like what direction I wanted to take, because the direction I thought I wanted to take turned out to be something that I just didn't want. It didn't feel like me at the end of the day. And so I had this existential crisis where I was like, I just really would like to go and do something completely different that I've never done before. And maybe by doing that, I'll figure out a little bit more about who I am. So I went and applied for a Fulbright, and I did it 2 weeks before the deadline, um, which I don't advise doing. But I remember I went to one of my professors and I was like, I'm thinking not for this round because the deadline's in 2 weeks, but maybe for the year after, and I'll just kind of take a year and work and figure some things out. And she said to me, she was like, if anybody can pull this off in 2 weeks, it's you. Apply now, just apply now. And I was like, okay. And I realized I had the thought, I was like, the worst thing they can tell me is no. And that mantra has gotten me so far in life, right? The worst thing they can tell me is no. And recognizing that I was telling myself worse things than that, right? And so yeah, I managed to get it, and I went and I taught English in Germany for a year, and I lived in this little town called Stadtwoude, which was in Thüringen, or Thuringia, uh, a former on the former east side of Germany. And I remember being very scared um, of because people, tell me about like, oh, I went to Germany when it was divided, and the East is this, and the East, this is it's, all these things, and that wasn't my experience at all. It was like the kindest people I've ever met. It was beautiful land, and you could see some of the, leftover like buildings from their um the Russian influence on that, but um it was gorgeous, and I was right near Jena, which was a university town, and so I did a lot of teaching there, and I got opportunities to travel. I visited, I was like 9 or 10 other countries while I lived over there, and I set I tinkered on writing a little bit, but I kind of set it down um, to just experience the world a little bit and figure out, who I was and my place in it, and um, learn about a different culture and a different time. And a lot of the people I knew, they did grow up under, behind the Iron Curtain, if you will. And the stories that they shared about what that was like, versus how things changed. Um, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and all that stuff. It was just fascinating. It was so fascinating. And I met so many cool people that I'm still friends with to this day. But the one thing that I kind of had in my head was, oh, you'll travel and you'll figure out who you are. And it was actually one morning walking to the school that I taught at, the gymnasium, uh, that I had a moment where I was like, I think I would be happy doing this for the rest of my life. I love the teaching, and I really like the kids and their questions, and getting to talk to them about books, and if this is the thing, if this is what the rest of my life looked like, I would be really really freaking happy. Um so then when I came back and I moved out to Colorado to get my master's at CU Boulder. They had an education program that I really liked and seemed very well respected. Um, and I remember a lot of people in the program, wondering, oh, am I going to like teaching? Am I going to like teaching? And the kind of adage, like it can be hard and not everybody's cut out for it. It was nice to know, like, I'm cut out for it, because if I can handle teaching in a classroom of people who do not speak my language, and I can teach across a language barrier utilizing both English and German, I think I like it, so that was really nice to have that knowledge of, um I'm pursuing this degree because I found something I'm really passionate about, and it was something I didn't expect. But then I've always carried that love of writing too, and so finally getting to a place in my career where I could take time to honor both sides of myself was really fantastic.
That's so beautiful. I didn't know that you had been a Fulbright scholar, and
Yeah,
I think no matter what, that's going to be a cool story.
it is. And one thing that I'll never forget was, um there were times where the idea of what an American was, uh and being told that from an outsider's perspective was incredibly eye-opening, to hear uh, a different country's perspective on what who Americans were. And in some ways, I was able to kind of push back against that. Um, I'll never forget, there was a time when my mentor, after knowing me for about a week, she said, "You're a lot more polite than we thought you would be." You're not as loud.
Yeah, the check.
You're not as loud, right? And so yeah, to even just to realize, like, there are stereotypes that exist in the rest of the world that aren't always flattering about what it means to be an American and to be from America, and to see some of those and reckon with some of those, that was uh really a powerful thing, and I'm grateful that I got to have that experience. I think it's an experience I wish I could gift that experience to more people, right? To see the place you grew up with out with somebody else's eyes. That was powerful. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes it was really frustrating. But I learned a lot about myself and about the broader world. So yeah, it was humbling at times, but it was so fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. I've now taken fully an hour of your life. So I will say thank you. And we'll move into the prompt which you brought us. Would you like to read it or I can?
If you have it pulled up, you can go ahead and read it, 'cause
I just want
yeah,
to
and
make sure you
it's
get
a
credit.
take it or leave it prompt, but um, we kind of touched on it a little bit today. So it's apropos.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I like to keep them thematic. Um, so yeah, set 5, 10, 15 minutes on a timer. Get yourself situated whatever time you can spare to do this writing prompt. Um, and whatever comes is perfect. Here it is. Think of a common everyday activity or object and give it magical value. Then allow a character to discover or reckon with that newly magical object or activity. How does it come into their life and what changes for them now that they have it? Thank you for that prompt. I'm going to do it. Uh, and thanks for hanging out with me today. And to everyone out there, please write more light into your life.
Yay!